The year was 800 AD, and a man knelt before God's representative on earth, and in that single moment, the ghost of the greatest empire the world had ever known stirred back to life. For one extraordinary century, the dream of a unified Roman Empire almost became reality again. Not through legend, not through myth, but through iron, faith, blood, and the terrifying ambition of a single man who refused to accept that Rome was truly dead. What followed was a chain of events so precise, so improbable, so dangerously close to reshaping all of Western civilization that historians still argue about it today. Because here's the thing, it almost worked, and if it had, the world you live in right now would look almost nothing like it does today. Stay with me, because this story is unlike anything they taught you in school. To understand how close we came, you have to go back to the rubble. Not literal rubble, though there was plenty of that, but the rubble of an idea. For nearly 1,000 years, Rome had been the center of the known world. Its roads connected every corner of Europe. Its laws governed millions. Its legions enforced a peace so total, so overwhelming, that people simply called it Pax Romana, the Roman peace. It was the closest humanity had ever come to a unified, civilized world under a single authority, and then in 476 AD, it collapsed. The Western Roman Empire didn't fall with a single dramatic battle. It dissolved, slowly, painfully, like a body that forgets how to breathe. Germanic tribes carved up the territory. Kings replaced emperors. Latin splintered into a dozen different languages. The roads crumbled. The aqueducts dried up. Libraries burned. And the extraordinary, terrifying machinery of Roman civilization, the thing that had kept the Western world stitched together for 5 centuries, simply stopped working. Europe fractured into hundreds of kingdoms, chiefdoms, and tribal territories. Darkness, literal and metaphorical, spread across a continent that had once gleamed with marble and torchlight, and for 300 years nobody came close to putting it back together. But someone was about to try. His name was Charles. And by the time history was done with him, they would call him something else entirely. Charlemagne, Charles the Great. The man who looked at a broken, shattered Europe and decided, with the absolute certainty of a man who has never lost a battle, that he could rebuild what Rome had lost. Born around 742 AD into the Frankish royal family, Charlemagne came to power in a world that was still raw and violent. The Franks were the most powerful Germanic kingdom in Western Europe, but powerful in the way a river is powerful, strong in some directions, chaotic in others, always threatening to overflow its banks. Charlemagne changed that. From the moment he became king, he fought. He fought constantly, relentlessly for decades, against the Saxons in the north, against the Lombards in Italy, against the Avars in the east, against the Moors in Spain, and with every victory his territory grew. But here's what made Charlemagne different from every other warlord of his era. He didn't just conquer, he governed. He established a centralized administration. He standardized weights and measures across his empire. He promoted literacy. He reformed the church. He brought scholars from across Europe to his court and demanded that they teach. In a world that had largely forgotten what organized civilization felt like, Charlemagne was trying, consciously, deliberately, to reconstruct it. He was trying to resurrect Rome, and that wasn't just ambition talking. Charlemagne genuinely saw himself as a Roman emperor in waiting. He studied Latin. He revered the memory of the old empire. He corresponded with the Eastern Roman Emperor in Constantinople, the last surviving remnant of the original Roman world, as a near equal. The idea of a unified Christian Roman Empire wasn't just a fantasy to him, it was a mission. And then came the night that changed everything. Christmas Day, 800 AD, St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Pope Leo III, a man desperately in need of a powerful protector after his enemies had tried to blind him and cut out his tongue, had a plan. As Charlemagne knelt in prayer during Mass, Leo stepped forward and placed a golden crown upon his head. The congregation erupted. The chant echoed through the ancient stone walls of the basilica. To Charles, most pious Augustus, crowned by God, great and peace-giving emperor, life and victory. In that moment, the Western Roman Empire was reborn, or at least it was supposed to be. Because what happened next is where the story gets complicated and dangerous and heartbreakingly close to something that could have rewritten the entire future of Western civilization. Charlemagne reportedly was not pleased by what Leo had done. His biographer, Einhard, wrote that the king said he would not have entered the church that day if he had known what the Pope was planning. Some historians think this was diplomatic posturing, Charlemagne not wanting to appear to owe his crown to a pope rather than to God or his own military might. Others think he was genuinely alarmed because what Leo had just done was incredibly politically dangerous. The Eastern Roman Empire, still very much alive and functioning in Constantinople, considered itself the only legitimate continuation of Rome. To them, the crowning of Charlemagne was an insult, an outrage, a declaration that some illiterate Frankish warlord could just decide to be a Roman emperor. And there was a very real possibility that this coronation could trigger a war between East and West, between the new Carolingian Empire and the Byzantine Empire, at the exact moment when Charlemagne's dream was most fragile. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what came next, the negotiation that nearly made it all real. Charlemagne, through a combination of military pressure and diplomatic brilliance, began talks with Constantinople. He even, and this detail is almost too extraordinary to believe, proposed marriage. Not his own marriage, but a political union with the Byzantine Empress Irene, who had recently seized power in Constantinople after having her own son blinded and deposed. Think about what that would have meant. A unified empire, East and West, Latin and Greek, Catholic and Orthodox, Carolingian and Byzantine, under a single political authority stretching from the Atlantic coast of France to the borders of the Middle East. The Roman Empire, reunified. The negotiations were real, the proposal was serious, and for a brief electric moment it looked like it might actually happen. What they didn't realize was that this moment, this single political negotiation in the early 800s, was one of the last genuine opportunities in history to prevent the permanent fracturing of the Christian world, not just politically, spiritually, culturally, in ways that would echo for 1,000 years. If the union had succeeded, the Great Schism of 1054, the catastrophic split between Catholic and Orthodox Christianity that divided the Christian world into two hostile halves, might never have happened. The Crusades, born partly from that religious fracture, might have taken an entirely different form. The Ottoman conquest of Constantinople in 1453, which shattered the last remnant of ancient Rome, might have been stopped by a unified Western and Eastern force. The entire trajectory of European history, from the Renaissance to the Reformation to the modern nation-state, might have bent in a completely different direction, all of it. Hanging on a marriage proposal in the year 802, and then Empress Irene was overthrown, a palace coup, a new emperor, a man named Nikephoros who had zero interest in recognizing Charlemagne as a legitimate Roman emperor and even less interest in political marriage. The negotiations collapsed, the window closed, and the dream of a truly reunified Roman world died quietly in the corridors of the Byzantine palace. But even without the Eastern Empire, Charlemagne's Western Empire was extraordinary. And here is where the tension becomes almost unbearable, because what he built was so close, so structurally similar to what Rome had been, that the question of whether it was a true successor state is not just academic, it's existential. At its peak, the Carolingian Empire covered modern France, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, northern Spain, and most of Italy. It had a centralized court, a common administrative language, a unified legal tradition, a dominant church that served as the glue holding everything together. It had everything Rome had, except Rome's staying power. Because Charlemagne made one fatal mistake, the same mistake that had killed Rome from the inside. He didn't solve the problem of succession. When Charlemagne died in 814, his son Louis the Pious inherited the entire empire. But Louis had 3 sons of his own, And under Frankish tradition, the same tribal inheritance law that Charlemagne had never quite managed to override, an empire was not a unified state, it was property, and property got divided. The three brothers went to war. In 843, they signed the Treaty of Verdun, carving the Carolingian Empire into three pieces. West Francia became France, East Francia became Germany. The Middle Kingdom, a long, awkward strip of territory running from the Low Countries through Italy, became a battleground that neither France nor Germany would stop fighting over for the next 11 centuries. The Roman Empire was dead again. But here is the thing that makes this story so haunting. It kept almost coming back to life. In 962, the German king Otto I was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in Rome, deliberately echoing Charlemagne's coronation 162 years earlier. The Holy Roman Empire, that strange, fragmented, magnificent, maddening political entity, would persist in some form until Napoleon dissolved it in 1806. For nearly 1,000 years, the ghost of Rome haunted European politics. Every powerful ruler who looked at the fractured continent asked the same question: could I be the one to put it back together? Frederick Barbarossa tried in the 12th century. Frederick II tried in the 13th. Charles V of the Habsburg dynasty came closest of all in the 16th century, ruling an empire that stretched from Spain to Austria to the Americas. His advisors literally used the phrase renovatio imperii, the renewal of the empire, to describe his mission. And every single time, the dream slipped away. Because Rome wasn't just a territory, it was a system, a set of institutions, loyalties, and shared assumptions about law, governance, and civilization that took centuries to build and could not simply be reconstructed by force of will, no matter how great the will. The moment that defined this entire story, the true climax, the hinge point on which everything turned, was not a battle. It was not a coronation. It was that failed marriage proposal in 802. That single diplomatic failure was the moment when the last genuine possibility of a unified Roman successor state died. When East and West parted ways, not just politically, but culturally, spiritually, and intellectually, beginning a slow divergence that would eventually produce two entirely separate civilizations, each convinced the other had betrayed the Roman inheritance. From that moment forward, Rome became an idea that different people used to mean different things. The Pope used it to claim spiritual authority. The Holy Roman Emperor used it to claim political legitimacy. Constantinople used it to claim cultural continuity. And all of them were right, and all of them were wrong. And the fighting over what Rome meant, who was its true heir, what it stood for, what it required, never truly ended. The consequences rippled through everything. The split between Catholic and Orthodox Christianity hardened into one of history's most durable religious divisions. The competition between papal and imperial authority in Western Europe produced centuries of conflict, and eventually, in a twist that would have horrified both Charlemagne and Leo III, the Protestant Reformation, which shattered Western Christianity the way Verdun had shattered the Carolingian Empire. The nation-states that emerged from the ruins of these competing claims eventually became the modern countries of Europe, each one a fragment of what might have been a unified whole. And here is the thought that should keep you awake at night, or at least thinking on the train home. We live in a world of nation-states, of borders and passports and national identities so deeply embedded that we assume they are natural, inevitable, the only possible arrangement of human civilization. But they are not. They are the result of a failure, a series of failures stretching back to a dead emperor in 814, a broken marriage proposal in 802, a crowning that almost didn't happen in 800. The Europe you know, with its 20-plus languages, its ancient rivalries, its two world wars, its long and painful process of integration through the European Union, is the Europe that emerged from Rome's second death. From the moment when the empire almost came back, but didn't. Had Charlemagne solved the succession problem? Had Empress Irene survived her coup? Had East and West found a way to unite under a common political roof? The history of the next 12 centuries might have been unrecognizable. No Crusades as we know them, no Reformation, no 30 Years' War, no Napoleonic destruction of the Holy Roman Empire, no World War I born in the ancient rivalry between German and French heirs to the Carolingian split, no World War II, or perhaps different wars, different disasters. History never stops being dangerous just because you change the map. But what is certain is this: the dream of Rome never truly died. It lives in the structure of the European Union, which explicitly models itself on Roman ideals of unified law and shared governance. It lives in the Catholic Church, which still uses Latin and still claims a universal authority descended directly from Peter and Rome. It lives in the legal systems of every Western nation built on Roman foundations. It lives in the very concept of Western civilization, that idea that there is something shared, something inherited, something Roman in the culture of the modern West. Charlemagne came closer than anyone to bringing it back. He built something real, something magnificent, something that genuinely deserved to be called an empire. And for one brief, some electric moment, kneeling in St. Peter's Basilica with a golden crown on his head while 1,000 voices chanted his name in Latin, the ghost of Rome was not a ghost at all. It was alive. History didn't change that day in 800 AD, but it came dangerously close to changing everything that came after it. If you enjoyed this story about a moment when history almost changed, make sure to subscribe. More unbelievable, almost happened events are coming every week.